The vendor is saying we have to hire them to fix the machine learning rules. False positives are killing us. We need another option. You understand what this means for Project AI Ops? Years of planning, millions of dollars down the drain. Go take care of this. You are out of time. When the fate of IT operations relies on machine learning, you can't see, don't understand, can't change, can't test. Be careful of black box AI ops.
Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our Resolve 21 conference today. Do you miss the movies? I know I do. So without too much delay, I want to begin our main feature, where we will be having Sean Mack, CIO of Wiley, discussing CIO leadership. Now, before I introduce our moderator for this session, I want to go over some basic housekeeping tips. First of all, please note that the widgets on your screen are adjustable, so you can maximize and minimize and customize to your liking. Second of all, if you have any questions for our speaker, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A panel, and we will get to questions at the end of the session. If we run out of time, we will reach out immediately after the summit. Now, last but not least, if you have any technical difficulties during the session, please reach out to our help desk, which can be found on the top menu. Now, I'm very excited to turn it over to the moderator for this session, my colleague, Katie Voles. Katie?
Hi, everyone. Good day, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're at. I'm Katie Voles, as Kautar said. I'm Sales Director at BigPanda. Really excited for the talk today. We have Sean Mack, CIO and CISO with Wiley. As you probably know, Wiley is a research and educational company. They do those books, the For Dummies series. So Stocks for Dummies, Taxes for Dummies. I have a number of them in my household. And they, of course, have a very large digital footprint as well, where they have platforms for education and research. And Sean's going to be spending some time today talking about the evolving technology landscape at companies and how you can be prepared to evolve as well as an organization. And in particular, he's going to be drilling in on Wiley's response to the pandemic and how leadership can support and better respond to crisis. So without further ado, Sean Mack.
Great. Thanks so much, Katie. Hi, I'm Sean Mack, and it is a pleasure to be here today at BigPanda's Resolve 21. Technology continues to evolve, and as leaders, we must too. While I do not have a crystal ball into the future of technology, what I can guarantee is that it will continue to change. And if we don't also continue to evolve as leaders, we're sure to stifle progress of our teams and our businesses. Today, I'm going to speak a bit about the evolving technology landscape and how that's impacted the evolution of leadership. I'll start with a little background about myself and Wiley to provide some context, and then I'll get into the changing technology landscape and how that's then led to the evolving role of the CIO and how that's developed in response to these technology trends. Finally, I'll provide some real-world examples about how these leadership changes can be useful in times of crisis and how these traits of the modern CIO have helped Wiley in responding to the crisis of COVID-19. And finally, I'll talk about where we go from here. What are some concrete next steps you can take? Now, one of the things I love about this event is that it's live. And I want to try and make this session a little bit interactive. And to that end, I'm going to ask some questions throughout. And I'd love it if you'd post your answers in the chat window here so we can all get to know each other a little bit. learn a little bit from each other. And I encourage you, if you like something you hear something that resonates with you, feel free to throw that in chat or throw in a hash chat. As we mentioned, there should also, if I can talk fast enough, be some time at the end for questions. So if you do have a question, put that in the Q&A section, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end to get to those. Now, at the end, I'm going to ask one question. I don't want you to answer now, but I want you to think about it. And that is, what are you going to do differently after this conference, right? And as I describe kind of some of the evolution of leadership, I want you to think about things you learn here or that you've seen already or that you might learn going forward about leadership, about BigPanda, and how you're going to change what you're going to do tomorrow. So let's get started. I don't want to spend a lot of time on myself or on Wiley, but I do want to introduce myself and Wiley to provide some background here. I'd also like to take this as an opportunity to get to know you a little better. While I'm sharing about myself, I'd like to ask you to introduce yourself in the chat window, and I'd like you to just type in the chat window your role, your industry, and where you're watching from today. So please take a moment, put that in the chat window, and let me tell you a little bit about myself and about Wiley. So as Katie kindly introduced me, I'm the CIO and CISO for Wiley. I was actually brought in to drive transformation. I was hired as a modern CIO. Now, I'll let you know something. When I was told that, I wasn't quite sure what that meant. But I've learned what that meant by learning what it was not. Now, I don't say that to denigrate prior leadership. What I do mean is that in looking at the past, I was able to see what the future of leadership needed to be. I was able to see the leader I needed to be. What I found was that the modern CIO leader is empowering, collaborative, agile. The modern CIO is a teacher, is an innovator, is customer focused, is transformational. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Let me tell you a little bit about Wiley. Wiley is primarily known as a publishing company, but now more than ever, we're a tech-enabled research and education company. Wiley's success has long been defined by our ability to listen to the world and adapt in response. Today, in the face of global pandemic and social and environmental crises, what Wiley does, research and education, is more important than ever. And for Wiley, the only path forward is to keep evolving in pursuit of our mission to help the world heal, recover, rebuild, and thrive. Now, we've been on this journey of transformation together since well before COVID-19. I've been with Wiley for about 1.5 years now. When I started, so this is prior to COVID-19, our CEO, Brian Mack, said that we are not in a single market that's not going through major disruption. And he's right. Everything from research to education to publishing. And those changes are only accelerated by these crises. Wiley is a company that's been around for over 200 years, and we've only been around that long because of our ability to continue to transform. The fact that nearly 80% of Wiley's revenue is generated from digital products and tech-enabled services, and that this continues to grow is testament from this transformation from publisher to digital disruptor. And thank you to those who have introduced themselves in the chat window. It's great to get to know a little bit about who's here. Now, I want to say, in trying to understand this evolving role of the CIO, I had to ask myself a question. I asked myself why. I asked myself if I'd been wrong in the way I had led in the past. The conclusion I came to is that technology is evolving, and how we lead must evolve in order to take advantage of this technology. The previous leadership styles weren't wrong. They were appropriate for the time and the technology, but the technology has changed, and we must change in response. And in order to understand the change in leadership, we must first understand the technology that drives those changes. So when we look back, way back, it was over 107 years ago, December 1st, 1913, Henry Ford installed the first moving assembly line for mass production for an entire automobile. Now you may be asking, what does this have to do with modern software? And I'll get there. Because in the 1960s and 70s, this transformed into with just-in-time manufacturing, which was introduced in Japan as a methodology aimed for reducing times within the production system, as well as response times from suppliers to customers. With just-in-time, we begin to introduce the concepts of small batch sizes and Kanban. By delivering smaller batches, manufacturers were able to reduce cost and reduce time from customer order to delivery. Now it should be starting to sound a bit more like modern software development. And these concepts can be seen in what we do today in modern development. Unfortunately, many companies continue to manage with the tools developed to manage assembly lines, tools that were developed to manage large groups of unskilled labor doing repetitive and manual tasks. So we must evolve. As technology continues to mature, we have seen a shift from mainframe to monolith to microservices. In the same way that just-in-time enables us to deliver quicker to customers, getting away from producing single, large, complete products to isolated components enables us to be more adaptive to market demands and more resilient to failure. The move to new software delivery mechanisms has had fundamental impact on how we develop software. I remember in 2004, I produced my last software on CD. Now, with web-based applications and software that is downloadable and automatically updated in small incremental updates, we can deliver value quicker in small chunks. And for consumers and developers alike, we find that these small updates are far more preferable. Continuous integration, continuous deployment, CI/CD facilitates rapid updates to software, which is automatically tested and deployed to the customer. The shift from data center to cloud-based technologies has also fundamentally impacted how we approach technology. The shift to ephemeral infrastructure in the cloud impacts not only how we architect our systems, but how we think about them and how we manage them. This shift from uniquely configured machines in a data center to automatically deployed infrastructure in the cloud is often described as pets versus cattle, referring to the uniqueness of pets and the disposability of cattle. And while I find this analogy a bit morose, it's very apt. But we need to understand that this is more than anything a shift in mindset. If we understand that our infrastructure is ephemeral, disposable, not unique, it fundamentally shifts how we manage it. Now, one of the most fundamental shifts in technology is actually a shift in thinking. It's a shift in thinking that derives from the ever-expanding power of technology. And that's a shift from technology as an enabler to technology as the core. Never has technology been more important. There has for some time been this understanding that the business needs technology, but more and more there's a recognition that technology is the business, or at very least that business and technology are inseparable. So with that backdrop of the shifting technology landscape, I want to delve into how the impact this has on how we can lead, how we lead companies. One of the most fundamental shifts in leadership is the shift from command and control to enablement and empowerment. And this comes from the transition from assembly line to high-tech workers. It comes from the understanding that high-tech workers are not assembly line workers. In fact, our engineers are highly educated, highly skilled professionals who, by and large, are motivated to do a good job. And when we look at the implications to this, it's huge. This allows us to implement flatter organizational structures. We need to recognize that people are not a commodity. They are instead our greatest assets, which means that we must take a people-centered approach, focusing significant time and effort on hiring the right people and developing the people we have. We must focus less on task management and more on mentorship and coaching. We also see a shift in leadership from waterfall to agile. And when I say agile, I mean agile not just in the capital A agile process sense, but also in the lowercase agile sense as in adaptive. As we transition from CD to web, it allows us to rapidly release incremental updates. As we move from software to software that's downloadable with regular updates, we can provide rapid updates. And this fundamentally shifts how we should approach and manage our technology. There's another important shift that comes as we move to web-based applications and services. It's how we approach teams. We begin to move from silos, teams of rival teams, to collaboration, teams of teams. I remember personally many years ago arguing that there was a benefit to having dev in one team and operations in another, right? And when we were shipping out software on CD and defects looked like bugs coming into a development team, this may have made sense. But in today's world of web applications, constant updates, we need to think differently. We need to look at what Wiley calls the cross-functional delivery teams, which include not just dev and QA, but also operations, site reliability engineers, database, people who are database focused, what we call database reliability engineers. It also brings about the thought of the T-shaped employee, this concept that people can be deeply skilled in a certain area, but need to have a broad sense of the context in which they work, not just their function, not just their feature, even beyond their product to the customer. We begin to shift from dev and ops to DevOps. Another major shift in leadership is from a blame-based culture to a learning culture. The move from CD distribution, from large monoliths, means that the stakes are lower for small mistakes. The ability to deploy small incremental changes allows us to correct more quickly. This in turn allows us to push the pace of innovation. Now, this shift of thinking has its origins back to the move away from assembly line and the related command and control management structures that were in place to manage that type of production. With the recognition that we're working with highly skilled employees who can work independently toward the better good of the company, comes the realization that failures are not coming from those who are error prone. They're coming from those who are trying the hardest, who are doing the most work and taking risks to do new things. This, in part, enables us to build a learning culture where the focus is more clearly on learning and less on preventing mistakes. It gives rise to the leadership concept of failing fast and learning. It gives rise to the concept of embracing failure as an opportunity to learn, because it's through continuous learning that it's only through continuous learning that we can emerge leaps and bounds ahead of the companies that breed a culture of fear. Now, we're at a BigPanda conference, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention observability and monitoring, right? Transparency and observability are other key principles that underlie modern CIO leadership, which are implemented then through proper monitoring. If monitoring is available, shared, and properly configured, it can provide visibility into rapid shifts, which may indicate crises. But in order to have a culture of transparency, there must be shared visibility into the monitoring data. In order to collaborate, all people within the organization must have visibility into the data that makes the organization run. Now, one of the most fundamental shifts that I talked about is that shift from technology as an enabler to technology as the core. And this has fundamental implications for how we manage and lead. Because as leaders, this means we need to move from an operational manager to a strategic driver. There's a McKinsey digital article called The CIO Challenge: Modern Business Needs a New Kind of Tech Leader. And in that article, they state, as technology becomes increasingly important, an organization's success depends on whether the CIO can move from being a functional to a strategic business leader. And they're right. It also means we must move from a cost controller to a value driver. In the same article, they emphasize the need for CIOs to move beyond simply managing IT to leveraging technology to create value for the business. And I think one of the most well-known examples of this is if you look at AWS, right? Where they built an internal system to drive their internal Amazon marketplace. And they then realized that this may have value for external users as well. And they now have what is one of the largest hosting providers in the world. The point is, we cannot be satisfied to simply save money. We cannot be satisfied to simply have fewer defects. We also need to move from running to transforming. I encourage everybody, all leaders or aspiring leaders, to be a change agent, to be a cultural revolutionary. The final change that's derived from this shift from technology as enabler to technology as the core is the need to begin to focus more externally. We need to understand our customers. Technology leadership and teams need to get closer to our customers. We need to understand the markets we operate in. And this isn't just for technology leaders. This is for engineers as well. We need to start thinking less like a traditional CIO and think more like a CEO. So I've talked a lot about the shifts in technology and the corresponding shifts in leadership. I want to look at some real-world examples of transformational leadership in Wiley's response to COVID-19. And I certainly don't want to take credit for this. Credit goes to the team and the leader at Wiley, the amazing team we have, and the leadership that was there before me. As I get into this, I want to ask another question of the audience. I want to ask, how did COVID-19 impact you, and how has your business changed due to COVID-19? And while I talk about that, or while you provide that information in the chat window there, I'm going to tell you a little about our own response at Wiley to COVID-19. Now, on March 13th, a year ago, just over a year ago, we left the office thinking we'd be back in the office on Monday. It wasn't until that Saturday, March 14th, that we decided we wouldn't. What we saw at Wiley was that the provisions we'd put in place to enable hundreds of remote workers, combined with planning around redundancy and resilience, enabled us to scale to thousands. We shifted resources to staff up our service desk. We had more calls coming in. We shifted resources to provide additional security. We allocated additional bandwidth. On the application front, we saw applications automatically scale to meet demand, and where they did not, and I'll tell you an example of that in a minute, we were able to rapidly push changes to improve performance for our customers. Ultimately, we were able to move about 9,000 employees to work from home in a matter of days with almost no impact. Not only that, but this crisis opened up an opportunity for acceleration on multiple fronts. This amazing response was only possible because some of the concepts we talked about in modern leadership in this presentation. Yeah. These are great responses in the chat. Yeah, I can very much relate to what the challenges you're talking about here. So one of the reasons I believe we had such a good response at Wiley. Yeah, some people, I've heard all sorts of things. Some people had it really hard. Some people, it was just seamless. I believe one of the reasons that it went very well for the team at Wiley was because of the concept of empowerment and a trust-based culture, because these are critical to a remote working environment. When we moved to work from home, productivity was the same, if not higher. Because in decentralized work from home environment, it's not possible to maintain tight control in a bureaucratic or micromanaged siloed environment. Teams with a trust-based culture where individuals are empowered to act are ideally suited to thrive in a work from home environment. The culture of collaboration was also seen in the rapid adoption of collaboration tooling such as Teams. Teams is our chat platform, and we saw a dramatic increase when work shifted from work to home, to work from home. Not only that, but this is a great example of where we used the crisis to accelerate additional change, deprecating Skype to get everybody on a single chat platform, increasing collaboration and productivity across the enterprise. Overall, we saw a 55% increase in daily activity after we moved to work from home. Now, we also saw impact our services, and in the rapid response, applications and services, and in the rapid response, we also saw some of the traits of modern leadership. Many of our markets at Wiley actually saw significant increases due to the pandemic. This was particularly true of our online educational platforms. As the global impact of COVID began to escalate in March, Wiley encountered significant increases in platform activity and load levels, and response times started to be impacted. This graph shows traffic on one of our professional learning platforms. Activity on a specific customer instance dramatically increased due to aggressive promotion of work from home training to their population. And this activated a known issue that started actually impacting all times for all instances in that hosting region. The performance degradation occurred due to problems with caching overhead in the application. And in order to address these issues, configuration changes were made first to limit the impact only to that one customer instance. Once that was completed, platform changes were developed and tested to optimize and reduce the caching overhead. The changes were pushed to production over the course of 2 days, resolving the problem and improving overall performance of the platform. This graph shows response times before and after the optimization. Pretty dramatic improvement. Because of agile practices and technologies such as CI/CD, we were able to react quickly to a serious problem by reprioritizing work to address the immediate need, while at the same time reducing the backlog and improving the baseline performance. We also saw a reflection of empowered teams and the responsive teams that were engaged in energizing by owning and managing the successful response and decision-making process directly. BigPanda was a huge help in our response too, providing insight to the health of our systems during times of rapid change. Issues like this one were rapidly identified and fixed. In addition, as part of the move to BigPanda, we undertook a concerted effort to reduce unwanted alerts, reducing alerts by over 50%. Now, in addition to looking at alerts in BigPanda, we rapidly deployed a business continuity dashboard, which had a broad range of data extending beyond system-level metrics to key business metrics. By sharing data of our technical teams and our business teams, we use the concept of transparency to truly allow our businesses to make better decisions in light of a rapidly evolving, changing environment during unprecedented times. You know, a continuous learning culture is another element central to modern leadership, which becomes increasingly critical in response to a crisis. At Wiley, we're focused on education, both for our customers and our employees. The pandemic forced us to learn new things at a rapid pace, from new tools to how to respond to new security threats. At Wiley, we rolled out a massive training effort for our collaboration tools, running 12 training sessions in the 2 weeks that followed our decision to work from home. We trained more than 2,700 attendees. We also rolled out new security training in response to increased cybersecurity threats related to the pandemic. This ability of a company to learn and adapt are great examples of the learning culture that's required for modern IT teams, which are critical to being able to respond during times of crisis. More than anything, the response to COVID-19 emphasized our ability not just to keep things up and running, but to drive strategy and innovation. Our team size seized the opportunity to push forward with key initiatives required to build better collaboration. We completed projects in 2 weeks, which had been in the works for 2 years. One great example of this was the remote imaging of laptops. I remember when I visited our team in the UK, and they told me they were working on a project so that they could ship laptops directly to the employees, and it had been in the works for a year. A year later, they were still working on it. But in the 2 weeks that followed the need to work from home, we had to do this. And the team came together to accomplish in a matter of weeks, which had been the projects which had been going on for years. It was a great benefit to the entire organization through automation and this process of remote imaging. All right, so I want to talk about where we go from here, and I'll wrap up with this. But before I do, I'd like to go back to the original question and ask you to enter in the chat thoughts about what you might do differently based on what you've seen at this conference so far. Because if we've just listened and not engaged, if we've listened but not learned, if we spent our valuable time, if you've spent your valuable time here all day and not change what we're going to do tomorrow, then we may be missing out on the opportunity that this conference provides. And while you put that in there, I'm going to talk a little bit about some ideas on next steps. As I said, I don't know the future, but what I can tell you is that the world is transforming, and we must too. I guess the reason I didn't understand what a modern CIO was is because the opposite simply doesn't make sense to me. Fundamentally, the role as a leader of technology requires that we must evolve with technology. And what I can tell you about the future reflects on the present, and that is that never has operations and execution been more important. Never has digital disruption been more relevant, and never has the role of the CIO been more critical. Changing technology requires changing leadership, and the changes in technology have led to the modern CIO. As we've evolved from the world of assembly lines to just-in-time, we must evolve our leadership from command and control to enablement and empowerment. As we move from mainframes to microservices, from CD to CI/CD, we evolve from leadership to agile, from silos to collaboration. As we move from the data center to the cloud, we move to a learning culture. As we understand technology at the core, We move from cost control to innovation engine, from internal focus to customer focus, from operational to transformational. The modern CIO is empowering, transparent, collaborative, agile. The modern CIO is a teacher, an innovator, is customer focused, is transformational. I encourage you, if you're a leader or aspiring leader, to be the leader that you would want to work for, to help drive transformation, and to use this challenge as an opportunity to drive change, because the hope that we will someday return to normal may actually be detrimental to our ability to move forward. I encourage you to stop waiting, embrace constant change, because there really isn't a back to normal. There's just the next normal and the next one after that and the next one after that. So if you're waiting for a return to normal, you may be waiting while we go out of business. Because while we may never get back to normal, there's tremendous opportunity in the next change, and it's up to you to take advantage of it. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope this was helpful. I hope it sparks some ideas. I encourage you all to connect with me on LinkedIn, where you can find me at Sean D. Mack, NYC, and continue the discussion with me at Twitter, where you can find me at Sean D. Mack, NYC. And if you're passionate about technology, I encourage you to join the team here at Wiley. You can find out more at wiley.com/careers. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. We will now, I believe, open it up for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. That was awesome. I love the quote there at the end about if you're waiting for the return to normal, it will never be the same, right? And I think there's been a lot that has come out of it that we'll do business differently now, right? And if you don't evolve, you'll be left behind. So I really like that. Awesome discussion. We do have some questions. We don't have a lot of time left, but let's go through some of these here. Folks, if you want now to take a moment, you can put them in the question and answer or in the chat, and I will try to get through them. But we'll just kick off here. So the first question, someone had asked, do I have to be a master at all the technologies to be a great CIO?
No. I'll just no, you don't. Look, and I'm certainly not. Like, I try and surround myself with people who are smarter than me, who know more about their areas than I do. That's what I look for. You can't know everything. You need to, I think, understand technology enough to ask questions and drive the right direction and make sure you get the right answers. But what I do is ask smart or sometimes stupid questions and understand enough about all of the areas to understand the information I'm getting back and make good decisions based on great input from people who know a lot more about these areas than you do.
Awesome. Okay. The next one is someone had asked, I've heard a lot about EQ, emotional intelligence, being more important now than ever. How has this impacted your leadership model?
Yeah, no, it definitely has. And I think this goes back to what I was talking about employees not being a commodity, but being our key resource, right? And when you understand that, it's like, okay, so my job is to help support my resources to understand what they need, and be responsive to those needs and help support them to grow. This doesn't mean, at least it's not my philosophy, that you need to do everything for them, especially in senior leadership. You need to have competent people, but you need to help facilitate their journey and learning. And also, make sure that they're happy, right? because it's not about squeezing an ounce more productivity from them, right? It's not about, hey, how many lines of code did you write? How many, miles of cable did you run? It's about empowering people who are great engineers, who are brilliant in their own right at whatever level they're working, empowering them to do a great job, to be creative. So yeah, emotional intelligence is critical. It's critical to providing that leader and building happy teams who are willing to learn, willing to make mistakes, and who are going to ultimately be targeted for that end vision and end direction with you. Because I know if I can set a vision and then build a team of amazingly talented and empowered engineers and give them the ability to execute, then we have a winning team.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I know firsthand. I've worked pretty heavily with the Wiley team last year and this year, and it's a great culture and a lot of camaraderie and a lot of support amongst your teammates. So I see it firsthand. Then the next question here is around. We've got 4 minutes left. How does someone not in management help move their team to an organization of trust that can thrive? And I think this was kind of in the context of work from home and, the pandemic and how things have shifted.
Yeah, it's tough. Trust-based cultures need to be enabled from the top and the bottom. Before I was at Wiley, I was running a global consulting firm that helped other companies go through transformations. And it's very difficult if you have a bureaucratic blame-based culture, and that culture is from the top down, to, as an engineer, shift that. Don't give up hope. like this is, I don't want to be all doom and gloom. Like, what I would say is embody the culture you'd like to be, right? Ask the right questions. And I'd also say it's a great market, right? Demand that you get the culture you want to be part of. And if you don't, there's plenty of places where you can find it, right? But it is something, I'll just say, that has to come both from the bottom and from the top, right? And it's hard to do it without both of those pieces coming together.
Agree. Okay, I think we have time for one final question, and it's a good one. It says, Sean, you have a unique position where you are both the CIO and CISO, of course, at Wiley. How do you balance the priorities of these roles, specifically around innovation, value to the business, which may push security practices past comfort, versus securing your enterprise, which may slow down innovation?
Yeah, I love this question. That's a great one, Tyler. So I was at a conference a little while back, and on a panel discussion, and the question came up, there was a CIO panel, and they said, how do you talk to the CISO? And I'm like, I just have a conversation with myself. It's actually much easier, right? People may look at me funny, but those discussions end up being easier than when it's two separate roles. But I actually have a unique vantage on this. Is I really think about DevOps and DevSecOps as working together, right? And I don't think these need to be fundamentally opposing forces. So when I think about security, I think about security as everyone's job, not just something that I'm going to go in and put up gates and force everybody to do. I think of security as a collaboration effort. And I think about how do we make security part of what we do every day, rather than as something we're going to test in or put gates in to ensure, right? And in that way, in the same way that we do our CI/CD, we get we get products faster to market that are more secure and more stable without having these be dramatically opposing forces. It doesn't mean it's not a challenge, but there is a way in which we can use collaboration to drive better, more secure applications and services.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, we are up on time. It is 2 o'clock. I will hand it over now to Kautar. Sean, thank you so much. That was fantastic.
Thanks so much for having me here today.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Katie. And thank you for everyone who attended this amazing session with Sean, CIO and CISO of Wiley. We hope you found it useful and inspiring. Now, to get to the next sessions, please go up to the main navigation and click the Sessions tab, which should be on top of the event panel. Now, please note that the Trivia Room, Community Lounge, Resource Center, and Panda Art Gallery are all open during the breaks, so please feel free to stop by and come in to play, network, and learn. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great day and enjoy the rest of the sessions.